You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Well, go away. Okay, why am I all blurry? I feel like there's Vaseline over my camera. There, that got a little bit better. Welcome to She Became Visible. I'm your host, Renee Steelman, and this is our Christmas special. And I could not think of anyone that I would rather have to talk about this holiday than Steve Pynakker. And if any of you are followers of Mormon Stories or the Mormonish podcast or drumroll Mormon book reviews, you are already familiar with Steve Pynakker. And I'm going to call him Steve. And I'm going to let Steve introduce himself. And we're going to talk about his journey from a belief in Christ, a follower of Christ, a little atheism, and then a 180 back to being a follower of Christ. And then how this journey has taken him and the reaction that he's gotten from friends and family and the community over this journey. And Steve has promised and said he's very willing to be vulnerable and tell us what's happened in the last few months and how his progress is going on this journey and what's happening with it. And we're going to just talk a little bit about that. The title of this episode is Putting the Christ Back in Christian. And I thought that was so appropriate. Many of you may have just skipped over it really quickly and read it and thought that it said Putting the Christ Back in Christmas, which we've all heard. But no, it's Putting the Christ Back in Christian. And we're going to talk a little bit about that because that's an interesting, I feel like Jesus is being used as a scapegoat for a lot of really bad behavior. So we're going to talk about that today. So Steve, where are you? There you are.
Merry Christmas.
Woo-hoo. Hey, Merry Christmas to you. Thanks for being on the show today. I know it's a Friday and you're 2 hours ahead. So I really appreciate you taking this time out of your weekend and hopefully you have your shopping done so you don't have to like run to the mall as soon as this podcast is over, right?
No, I think I'm going to start Christmas early. Maybe I'll attack the eggnog when I'm done with this.
There you go. You know, I absolutely love eggnog, but I've never had a true eggnog with alcohol in it. Is it rum that they put in eggnog?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, I have it every once in a while. It's like I'm not a sweet tooth, so I'll just have a little. It's almost too rich, for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Christmas when you're feeling all the burning in your bosom, if you will, of the alcohol and the and everything like that, and all the excess food you're eating.
Yeah. It's a different kind of burning in the bosom. Probably not the one talked about in the Book of Mormon, but yeah. No, and it's funny because you're right. It's a very sweet, thick, dense drink. And I absolutely love it. And I was so disappointed because I went through Starbucks the other day and they had some chai, tea, eggnog thing. And I was like, oh, yay, I love eggnog. And then I got it and I was like, yeah, I don't know what you put in this. Maybe a little cinnamon, maybe a little nutmeg, but it did not taste like eggnog. So I was disappointed. But anyway. So Steve, for our audience, and like I said,
I have no idea.
Oh, did you lose something?
See me.
Oh, I can see
lost
you.
Renee, or Renee's lost me. Let's see. You okay, Renee?
I'm good. I can see you.
Okay. You froze on me.
Okay.
Did I freeze on you?
No, you were just staring into like, oh crud, what's going on? Look.
Oh,
So,
okay.
are we all back? Are we good?
I'm hearing you loud and clear. I have no idea what happened, but that happens.
Okay. I noticed
That's
on my
what I'm
last
told.
podcast, there was a little bit of frozen thing too. So it might be my internet is going cuckoo. Who knows? But whatever. Anyway, so for those people who are not familiar with you and your podcast, give us a little intro, because I think it's absolutely, I love your story. I love your story of being a non-member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, have never been, don't have any intention of being, but you fell in love with the Book of Mormon, and that kind of set you on this journey. So tell the audience that story.
Well, I have to say that I've always felt like I had this affinity, this kinship with the young Joseph Smith in particular. I remember being a young boy and really having like a burden for souls, which I think is what young Joseph also had. He wanted to, save, he wanted people to come to Christ. He wanted people to come to repentance. And he also saw that a lot of the problems, Christianity was under attack. So you had the rise of secularism and universalism. You also had the rise of like the Age of Reason by Thomas Paine was read in the Smith household. And so there was a real, like in his mind, a perceived attack on Christianity. And as a young boy, I kind of felt the same way growing up, and almost thought, as a young boy, I thought we need a second Bible. We need another set of scriptures that can be more modern to address the issues of our day. And then when I found out there was this other young boy about 200 years earlier that thought the same thing and would engage a text of scriptures, another scripture, another Bible, that was truly fascinating to me, the concept. And really, I think I first fell in love with the Book of Mormon. Before that was when I was around 8 years old, and we were visiting a Marriott hotel. Yeah, 8 years old, visiting a Marriott hotel and coming across the Book of Mormon and going through and looking at the Arnold Freiberg paintings and become entranced by them. And honestly, I think that's when my love affair with Mormonism began. Was those paintings were so fascinating to me. And I actually, last time Richard Bushman was on my program, we talked about that, and he had told me that those Arnold Freiberg paintings that made their way into the Book of Mormon were originally made to appeal to children. And so
really,
Richard Bushman told me, he said, it shows that it worked because it captured your young mind. And that's the first time I'd heard that those paintings were made in particular for children. And
they weren't made for young women to look at and go, wow, yes, that is exactly what I'm looking for in a husband and a companion. About 6'5", 230, biceps the size of a leg. Yes, that's exactly what I'm looking for.
Maybe that's when I first realized I was gay.
Yeah, that could have been. It's like, wow, he's hot. I remember this is so probably not woke, but I remember the first time we went to Hawaii, and I just saw these huge men, these Tongan, Samoan, Hawaiian, beautiful men with their beautiful skin, and they're 6'3", and I was like, oh wow, that's a Nephite. Okay, I got it. It's like, and so yeah, that could have been a little bit, but that's interesting that Richard would say that it must have been that whole superhero.
Yeah, well, what it was actually, and I've done some research on Arnold Freiberg, because again, I know Minerva Teichert. I mean, look, I love her work.
Oh
yeah, I love it. She's awesome. And it's interesting how she puts a lot of women in her paintings. I find it fascinating that the Angel Moroni looks quite feminine as well.
No kidding. Wow.
Yeah. So I thought that was really interesting. So Arnold Freiberg, he actually believed that what he was showing is that the physical strength that you saw manifest in the paintings were actually reflective of their spiritual strength. So that's what he was trying to. So it was actually there's another level to the physical build of the characters that actually their physical stature is actually representative of their spiritual strength.
Wow. It's a good thing we don't put our quorum of the 12 up to that standard, or we would be failing in spirituality a lot. Interesting. But I heard you on another podcast say that you actually have never read the entire Book of Mormon cover to cover. Right. So when you picked it up as a young boy and took it home with you, if I remember right, it's not like you looked at it.
So I've encountered my first book in my collection, which is this one here. I stole this when I was on a high school Christian high school basketball tournament from a Marriott hotel, and this is the very first book of my collection. Was this Book of Mormon?
So you found it when you were 8 years old in a Marriott, but you didn't take it until you were a little bit older, and you know that's exactly what they want you to do. So they're so happy when they're gone. So that's okay. You can't hold you responsible for that. So okay, so now that's 2 encounters you've had. Mm-hmm. But you still haven't read it cover to cover.
I haven't. And it's interesting because I'm actually thinking, because next year is Come Follow Me, and they're going to be doing the Book of Mormon. I'm good friends with Dr. Nehemiah Gordon, who's one of the top Hebrew scholars in the world. And he's intrigued with the Book of Mormon and the translation process. And actually, I'm helping, I'm kind of involved, like unofficially involved in a project that's is engaging the text of the Book of Mormon in a Hebrew context. And that's all I'll say, because it's really kind of not really well known. Right. But Nehemiah is intrigued by it. And again, he's one of the top, and he's a Jew. He's had Dan Vogel on his program. I just helped him book Roy Skousen to come on his program. He's really and truly intrigued by the Book of Mormon story, just like I am in many ways, but he's doing it on a scholarly level. And him and I have been toying with the idea of actually a Jew and an evangelical reading through the Book of Mormon together.
Wow, I love that idea. I know the Paul brothers challenged you to do that, and but I love the idea that you're reading it with a Hebrew scholar, because I'm sure there's going to be some insight into that.
And probably bring other scholars in to talk, and we probably have critical scholars, that believe that it's a 19th century origin. We'll have people that believe that it's an ancient origin. I think it's really good to mash it up and have these conversations. And just, I tell people, I say, listen, and I tell this to evangelicals, if you separate Joseph Smith from the Book of Mormon and you separate the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from the Book of Mormon and just engage the text, you're going to be pleasantly surprised by the Orthodox Protestant theology that you will find in this book. Mm-hmm. And so I say it's one of the most Christian books ever written on American soil.
I heard you say that, and I actually love that, because if we could take away the elitism that Mormons think with this Book of Mormon, that it was something that was given to Joseph Smith, that it was something that was given to us,
right,
and that it was our job to go and change the other people with this book. I love the way you said that you looked at it if you looked at it from another evangelical testimony of Jesus Christ, that completely changes the purpose of the book. And when they talk about the book being another testament of Jesus Christ, then it's like, oh, okay, well, with that view, I could look at this book, rather than having you tell me that we have this book. This book was given to us because we're better than you. And so now we're going to let you have it as long as you now come unto us.
Right.
And instead of just welcoming other Christians into the literature as this is a great story. Mm-hmm. And like you said, and I like when you said too, that you looked at it just like you look at the Bible, with the stories and the metaphors and the parables. And if you looked at it like that, instead of a historical document, which will be interesting for you to talk about with your podcast companion, that's fascinating. I'm excited for that.
Yeah. So look for that. Hopefully next year we'll be doing a read through the Book of Mormon. So then I'll finally have read through it cover to cover, and then we'll see what happens.
That's going to be an interesting year, because there is so much with the Gospel Topics essays and Richard Bushman and other scholars and then you've got the strong movement with the Book of Mormon, with the mound builders theory. And was it a stone in a hat? Was an actual translation?
Lost you again.
Oh, crud.
There we go.
Am I back? Okay.
Yeah, you're back.
All right. So, if that's that, I mean, there's so much. If this is not just let's all read the Old Testament together, there's a lot of controversy out there about the reality of how the Book of Mormon came to be. And so it'll be interesting to see how the Come Follow Me program, I won't, but my husband can share with me what he learns when he goes to church. Yeah. But that's going to be interesting. So do you currently follow the Come Follow Me program on the BYU channel?
You know what? Occasionally I engage it, but not regularly. No. Okay. It really, honestly, I tell people, I'm more of a Book of Mormon guy. So when they did the Come Follow Me programs like 4 years ago, I was going and checking out different ones. and doing that one. The one I was using the most actually was Rod Meldrum's, but there were other ones I was engaging as well.
Yeah.
So
that's interesting. Well, this will be fun. This will be exciting. I'm anxious but let's talk a little bit about Mormon Book Review and how that got started, and who you've interviewed, and also when you're talking about that, talk about how that came to be because of your journey through Christianity.
Wow. Okay. Well, I guess I have to start with this. How I think the good jumping off point is part 5 of my episode of Mormon Stories, where the episode is called "How Mormonism Saved an Evangelical's Life," on Mormon Stories, mind you. Okay. And that was a really effective episode that really, literally, I could tell people were contacting me throughout the world. My phone was buzzing like crazy when I did that final episode of Mormon Stories. I could tell that people were crying as they were writing the emails to me. It was that powerful of an episode on Mormon Stories. And I think that's really part of my journey. So I have had this long obsession ever since I was a young boy with this other young boy named Joseph Smith, who I felt like I kind of resonated with. And so I felt like a real kinship with him. And I kind of saw the world in many ways the way he saw them. And as my journey progressed while I was raised in a conventional evangelical Christian home, come from Dutch Reformed stock on both sides of the family, my parents became charismatic Christians. I continued my journey as a good Christian boy who was also struggling with same-sex attraction, right? And right around the same time, I really started my love affair with Mormonism. Was right about the times that my budding sexuality came into the picture. And so I've had this lifelong battle inside of me. And really what ultimately happened about 20 plus years ago, I decided to leave evangelicalism altogether because I just felt like it gotten so toxic. And so I didn't leave my Christian faith. That would follow maybe 5 or 6 years later, where I finally just gave up on Christianity and religion and faith in God and belief in God altogether. Just said, forget it. I read all the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, atheists, Hitchens and all them. And I read all the Dawkins and and I read all their stuff. And I just remember after reading their materials, I was like, okay, that's it. No God. So I walked away from belief in God. And that was around probably 2006 or so. So then I'm like, also at this time, a couple of years later, I'm starting to go through some severe, kind of like a mental breakdown. I had a breakdown when I was in middle school. I had another breakdown probably around 2008 or so. I don't know. And then, honestly, the only thing that was really keeping my interest was Mormonism. So I study, like, I'm one of those people, like, when I'm interested in a subject, I'll just study the heck out of it. I've studied all different religions and all different types of things. I mean, literally, before the internet existed, there was me. Like, when I'd be out with my friends, if they had a question about just about anything, I could give them the answer. Not people just Google it, right?
The walking encyclopedia.
My walking encyclopedia, yeah.
Yeah.
And so but the one thing I kept going back to, especially in the depths of my depression, was this obsession I had with Mormonism. Now, I do think this is kind of a defense mechanism. Like my brain is trying to keep me alive. So it's realizing like it's almost like I'm obsessed with it, and realizing that when when people decide to commit suicide, it's because they've lost interest in everything, and they eventually just lose interest in life. Well, I think by keeping my interest in something, Mormonism in particular, it saved my life. So now this is what's crazy, Renee, is I read all these books and papers. I go online. I'm doing all this research. I'm checking books out of the library, and I don't have anybody to talk to. I'm just consuming this stuff. And I feel like, I mean, I just read. I didn't know how interested I was, and kept on going down the rabbit hole. Well, about 2.5 years later, about 2.5 years ago, the idea started about doing the YouTube channel. But I will say, a year before that was COVID, and COVID was actually the event that kind of led me back into faith. And so, is everything okay, Renee? I'm hearing a.
Hey, Steve.
Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, I cannot hear you very well.
Oh.
And I don't know if I touched something or what I did.
Well, check your.
So can you hear me like you were before?
Loud and clear. Check your volume. your volume control on your computer. Make sure that you have your volume all the way up.
No, that's going okay. That one's going okay. Speaker, echo, automatically adjust mic. Yep. Got all that going. I don't know what I went to move my microphone. I think I accidentally touched something. So I'm going to go keep talking. Say something.
Okay. Yeah. So, and by the way, for those of you who are watching this, if you can comment in the comments, let us know if you are able to hear me okay. You could let us know as well. Hopefully this will work out. This is live television for you. You just don't know,
there you go. Yeah, I can hear you now.
I'm clear.
You're right. Yeah, you're back. Okay.
Okay.
I think I have a loose wire, but anyway. Okay. Good. Excellent. Yeah. Excellent. Okay. So just going back a little bit contextually, when you talk about your depression, can you go back and reflect on what you think may have put you in that position? Was there something going on in your life that was causing that, or do you think it was more of a chemical imbalance, or can you contextualize those episodes you talked about with the depression when you were younger?
Well, there was some really bad. I had my father was a very difficult man and was an alcoholic, and right around the time I was in like 7th or 8th grade, we had some issues in the home, and it really caused me to spiral into depression. Okay. And then I would say that I've always kind of been a depressed person. I've suffered depression basically most of my life. I would have my good moments, but it just there was always this melancholy that was there. Yeah. I also think it's because I was in a high demand religion like evangelical Christianity, in which you can't be gay and Christian. I mean, basically, I was told you can't be gay and Christian. So I think there was always that pressure that was always there. And it's actually that pressure that, I felt like a lot of people felt like I was called to go into ministry, and I couldn't because I was gay in my mind. So I threw myself involved in politics. I thought I perhaps could help usher in God's kingdom through political ways. And so that was kind of my worldview. So, but yeah, no, I think the whole thing, and for me, the whole thing, what happened was I come from a family of 5 brothers and sisters. So I'm number 3. Number 4 of 5. Okay. Yeah. And I have 3 older sisters and a brother, and then there's a 10-year gap. And then there's me and my younger sister. And basically I knew that once my younger sister got married and I wasn't married yet, that they would kind of put that's when the ticking, with the clock would start going. I said, well, why isn't he married yet? Right. So that was right around the age of 25 is when 24, 25, when I finally decided to come out of the closet. And what I did was I was the city sealer for the city of Hammond, Indiana. And that was the Department of Weights and Measures. It was a political appointment, and I had a falling out with one of the mayor's cronies. It was a corrupt government, corrupt cronies. These I think one of them even ended up going to jail or was indicted. But I was so burned out of politics that I said I was going to go to work at Borders in Highland, Indiana, which, by the way, this is Northwest Indiana. This is blue collar, culturally very conservative. And one of the only places where gay people had a safe space was at Borders in Highland, Indiana. So I mapped out, okay, how am I going to make this work? I thought I need to get a job at Borders, and I need to create my own community so that if I do come out of the closet and I lose my familial and Christian community, I'll have my own community there at Borders. So that kind of gave me like a safety net for me. So, and so that was the whole thing with going to work at Borders, was really to create an environment so that I have a safe space as a gay man in a very culturally conservative area, in a very culturally conservative religion that I was raised in. So I think when you say what's the root of depression, I think it's, being a gay man in the closet is hell.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right when you talk about, I cannot imagine as a young 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old having the pressure of a belief and a love so dedicated and so real for you, authentic. It's an authentic love of Christ, of your religion, of your belief, but also knowing who you were and knowing that this was not going to be accepted.
Right.
And then I just picture this young 18, 19-year-old young man thinking, where is a safe space for me? It's not at my church. It's not in my community, oh, I did find this little coffee shop. I did find this bookstore. Those people will love and accept me. I'm going to go work there and find my crowd, my tribe.
Mhm.
And that is something that a heterosexual teenager, they might go through some kind of acceptance, because all teenagers do. There's always going to be the football table in the cafeteria that you're not allowed to sit at. Puberty is hell. Let's all, we all know that. But in your case, it has gotten so myopic and down to one little tiny sliver of a lane that you can walk down, that nobody else has to do that. And then, like you say, to have that fear of, okay, now my sister's getting married and people are going to be like, why is Steve still at home? What's going on here? And how did your mother deal with this? Because your dad and your mom had separated by that time.
Oh, no,
right?
They're still together.
No.
No, they never separated.
No.
Yeah.
Wow, what a wonderful woman. Have they figured things out?
Well, my dad passed away in 2020. He suffered dementia, so it was a blessing that he passed. And so,
right.
So yeah, and that's actually right around the time he passed away is where the idea germinated to start Mormon Book Reviews.
Wow. Did you feel like you were free to do that?
Yeah, I don't think I'm in a 50-year-old mobile home in Florida, and I don't think that, even though I have my own little studio here, the walls are paper thin. I don't think my dad we would have been able to do it, right. So it was just kind of, fell into place in that way. But yeah, my dad he could have lived a lot longer, but he actually ended up dying from an infection. And but he would still be alive right now if that infection didn't happen, because we have our genes. We live very old. The Dutch in particular have long lifespans, and so he would have still been alive. He would have made it into his 80s, mid to late 80s easily. So
that's amazing. So you've gone through this journey, and I know on your Mormon stories you talked a lot about finding your group at Borders and whatnot. But so talk about, as you're starting the Mormon Book Review, you're getting really positive vibes from the evangelical audience, and also from the LDS and Exmo audience. Is that correct?
Yeah.
But you mentioned that you're getting quite a following, and you're interviewing some really remarkable people. And there's that quote that I love that Teddy Roosevelt gave, the man in the arena, and it says, "It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But who does actually strive to do the deeds? Who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause?" And then it goes on, and it kind of goes back to the, dead dogs, you don't kick dead dogs. You found yourself in the arena, and you're kind of getting some kickback. Yeah. And talk a little bit about what's been happening the last couple of months and where that's put you. And the reason I titled the thing "Putting Christ Back in Christians" is because the kickback that you're getting is coming from Christians.
Yes.
And they're doing it in the name of God. The kickback is in the name of God. And that's what I think is so fascinating.
Yeah. And, I was once much like these men. I come from a pretty conservative, orthodox, Calvinistic background. And I could be very much like the way they are. I was much the same way. So I have a certain degree of understanding and empathy for them. I get why they believe the way they believe. I just think that for me, it was just so basically a few weeks ago, it's probably been a month and a half ago or so, I had posted that I'm kind of going through some trauma, and there was just a series of a lot of events, both happening here at the house, that were kind of causing me stressors. And then just this wave of attacks from people. One person was just messaging me just constantly on Messenger. And finally, he just says, "I don't believe you're a Christian." I'm like, whoa. I'm like, well, I multiple times would go to him and say, "Listen, this is what I do. Literally, when somebody criticizes me on Reddit or on Facebook, I don't hide behind a keyboard. I literally go and say, let me send you a Zoom link right now. Let's have a man-to-man, face-to-face talk. It's usually men, of course, that always attack me. It's always men that attack me.
Really?
Yeah. And you know what? They never accept the challenge. I've been on this Christian apologist for 2.5 years, offering multiple times and going through third parties. This guy criticizes me in public, but he's a coward. He's not man enough to come on and do a Zoom call. I won't give his name, not yet, but it's him and his and people that are in his orbit. Another guy, he attacks me, says, I don't believe you're a Christian. So some of these Christians are going to me and saying, well, we don't think you're an evangelical. I'm like, well, actually, you know, and I'm just sitting there like, and I had this freaking Presbyterian pastor in Utah go to me and say, Steve, do you believe that Joseph Smith was a prophet of God or a liar? And I'm like, do you got 3 hours?
Yeah.
Because I don't do either or questions, buddy.
Yeah.
Okay. Because like, what's a prophet? What is scripture? Well, let's have this conversation. But I'm not going to do your either or black and white Manchian thinking, which is what they're infected by. Right. And that is why people like me leave Christianity and leave evangelicalism, is because of such thinking. Black and white, us versus them. It's very divisive. And we wonder why this country is in the mess that it's in, because it's people like that have taken over Christianity and have decided to be the gatekeepers to determine who is a true evangelical or not. And I'll be honest with you, Renee, I was so ticked off at these characters a few weeks ago when I did that initial post that I was seriously considering chucking the term evangelical. And because I was like, do I really want to be associated with these people? Because I look at people like Randy Bell. I look at the author who wrote the book John Wayne and Jesus.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
I was the first person to ask her a question at Sunstone. I said, I want to challenge you. Because she's a member of the Christian Reformed Church. She's which is the denomination that my family came out of. And she's a professor at Calvin University. And I said, I want to challenge you. I said, I really want you to use the term evangelical. And she said, no, I can't. And I because I'm almost like, we need good people to reclaim the term evangelical. Right. I look at Randy Bell, and like Randy Bell, you know, he attended Saddleback for a while. He's actually friends with a lot of people at Saddleback. He likes that church. That's in Southern California, but he calls himself more on the progressive side, which is fine, of evangelical or Christianity. I have a lot of friends that won't use evangelical. I'm like, oh, why are we ceding all this territory to these people, this intellectual dead endism that is much of the Christian apologetic community? And it's like, it's these very people. And this is the important thing. The beginning of my deconstruction of my faith was this book, Josh McDowell, The New Evidence That Demands the Verdict. Okay. I came across this because it was around the year 2000. And I'm like, I don't know much about Christian apologetics. I need to figure out what this is all about. I just assumed these were really smart people that were running circles around the seculars and the atheists. And I pick up this book, and I'm reading through the introduction. I remember this Josh McDowell saying, making a comment about how the Bible is scientifically proven to be true. I'm like, really? Well, let me check the footnote. And the footnote was the Genesis flood that came out in the 1960s by Whitcomb. This is a young Earth creationist document saying that there was a literal global flood, and that's scientific evidence that proves the Bible.
Yeah.
As soon as I read that, I was like, Houston, we got a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
If this is the best argument, the best-selling book of all time, one of the most best-selling books in Christian world of Christian apologetics, if he's using that as a source, I knew we were in big, big trouble. So then I realized, Christian apologetics is not made to bring the idea, defend Christianity in the marketplace of ideas. It's there to keep people in the church. Sound familiar?
Yes. Yes. That's one of the things that I have learned as an ex-Mormon, because it keeps getting, people keep reflecting back on, you've got to look at the footnotes. You've got to read the footnotes. And that's something that's been awakened in me to find out. And Dan McClellan's really good at that, just looking at the footnotes, finding the trail, searching back where this came from, and not just taking this verbiage as gospel truth without finding out what the resources are.
Right.
And that's what it boils down to. So that's amazing. That's a big book to just go, and no.
Yeah, exactly. And see, this is the thing. One of my critics wrote this book, and I'm not going to say his name, but a similar thing happened to me when he sent me this book last year. Now, this is a person who attacked me for attending the Bickertonite baptism a few weeks ago.
Oh,
This is
okay.
the person I was in contact with, okay? In contact with on Messenger. He does not contact me because I went to go visit the place where he's associated with, the ministry he's associated with, to talk to his boss. The next morning, I'm greeted by an attack from him about attending this baptism. And I'm like, well, first of all, why didn't you just message me? But no, he wanted to publicly say, well, look, we're going to publicly correct Steve, which is what these guys do. And I'm like, if you have aught against me as a brother, you're not supposed to do that. I'm sorry. You're supposed to come to me directly.
Right.
And all these Christian apologists, I don't see them following scriptural precedent when how they deal with me. So I feel like they're modeling unchristian behavior to a largely Latter-day Saint audience. And I'm like, you guys are part of a ministry and you're not even following the correct way of how you're supposed to correct a Christian brother. Right. So I get this book from him last year. And I go through it, and this was pointed out to me by a very prominent Christian scholar, okay, who's a good friend of mine. And in here, he has this thing called recommended resources.
Okay.
And he says at the end of each chapter, and he has an entry-level resource, mid-level resource, and advanced resource. He puts as an advanced resource James White as an advanced resource to be used to study Mormonism and biblical Christianity, as they call it. James White, Dr. James White, gets his doctorate from a diploma mill. He's not a legitimate doctor. No scholar that I engage with takes James White seriously. And this guy's going to a layperson audience and saying, this is an advanced, it's like, to me, that was my Genesis flood moment for that book, was like, if you're using James White, and he uses James White as a resource throughout the book, who is not he's a virulent anti-Mormon scholar, first of all, and his doctorate comes from a diploma mill. There's Christian apologists, Christian scholars have brought this to my attention. Even Mormon scholars brought this up. So when he's using that as a resource, I'm like, what kind of materials, apologists, are you using for your audience? Right. You can do better than that. I'm actually going to Christian apologists. I'm not saying not to do apologists. I'm just saying just do better scholarship.
Right. Right.
Now, to defend Josh McDowell, I will say there was a gentleman who 3 years ago gave a presentation at Sunstone talking about how the apologetic history of Josh McDowell, how it has gotten a little bit better since the 70s, because his son Sean McDowell has a little bit more, has some decent credentials. So he's been helping his dad with the evidence that demands a verdict series. And they have improved things from, according to this gentleman, who's an atheist, by the way, because everyone went to him and said, well, if they're doing better apologetics, do you believe now? He said, no, I'm still an atheist. I'm just saying that they're doing it a little better than what Josh was doing in the 70s. So we can see that it's possible that you can actually improve your scholarship. Like apparently Josh McDowell they have done better. They've made improvements in how they do it. I want to go to other Christian apologists in particular who are engaging Mormonism. You guys got to do a better job with your scholarship. I actually through this one Christian ministry, and they claim to be researchers, but yet I don't see them at Mormon History Association. I don't see them at the John Whitmer Historical Association. I gave a presentation last month or 2 months ago at the John Whitmer Historical Association. If Christians apologists who are claiming to do scholarship want to be taken seriously, they need to be present at these conferences. They need to be presenting papers, and then it will actually help them improve their work, and therefore they can do, I think, better scholarship equals better apologetics. So that's my challenge to them. I even told them, I said, I'm not hating on you. I think some of the work you do is fantastic. But I also look at a lot of the stuff they do is not taken seriously by any academics. And I feel like if it's not being taken seriously by academics, then you're doing your layperson audience a disservice by disseminating to them bad information.
Yeah. And I think what's so hard is that there's a lot out there now because of the political situation that our country is in. And it was ironic because I was actually I'm trying to watch more BBC to try to get a better outlook. Maybe what does the world think we're doing right now? I try to watch that. So I was watching, and they were talking about the Christian nationalism movement that's going on right now. And of course, they always have to bring up the January 6th insurrection. But, they had a lot of evangelical people on talking about, as you mentioned before, the black and white mentality. It's like Democrats are Satans. They're demons. They have been taken over by Satan, and it is our job as evangelical Christians to destroy these demons. And these are all people that are amening, and Jesus told us to do this, and this is what we're supposed to do. And I'm thinking, I don't remember hearing that in the New Testament. I don't remember, and then they'll say, and I heard you on another podcast, and this particular gentleman talks about the teddy bear Jesus, that everybody wants the teddy bear Jesus. And I'm like, so, and the alternative to the teddy bear Jesus is the turning the tables Jesus, the anger, and you think that's the Jesus that we want? And do you even understand the story behind that parable that's told? And and so there's that kind of back and forth, black and white type thing. And it's amazing. I actually, was listening to another podcast, and they were referencing, and this was probably, you'll have to tell me because I'm sure it isn't, but in my eyes, he brought up immediately John Delen's family. And he said, hey, John Delen just posted a picture of his kids. One of his kids got married, and he posted this family picture. And I'm just here to say that I'm really worried about John Delen's family and what John Delen is doing to destroy his family. And he said, but coming from in a belief in Jesus, I'm just trying to warn him about what's going to happen, because look what he's doing to this family. And I was, it took my breath away. It took my breath away that on this podcast, he would show this picture, completely target this one man, attack his family, and then say, I'm only doing this in the name of Jesus. It was absolutely breathtaking for me. I was like, oh my gosh, that's the most hateful thing I think I've ever seen. Obviously, it's not. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now. But the fact that he would use Jesus to say that what I'm going to say to you now has been authorized and is in love. I'm doing this in love. And what was so ironic, Stephen, was his biggest thing was, look at these kids. Are they going to get married? Are they going to have grandkids? Is John Delen going to have grandkids? How can they ever find happiness if they don't have large families? They're never going to find happiness. And I thought, where do you live? I live in a retirement community. Most of the people in this community are 55 and above. It's not an official retirement community, but there's a lot of golf going on. So there's still people that are working and things, but most of the people are 55 and above. Many of these people had 2 children. They are in their late 60s. They still do not have a grandchild. They are true, biblically loving, Bible study, going to church people who love God. But somehow this man associated success and the love of Jesus with the LDS concept of having large families and traditional roles that have been given to you. And that's the only thing that there is. Blew my mind. And so when I saw your Facebook posts and you talked about the trauma that you were going through, the joy, you had so much joy in your heart when you were talking about the baptism that you just went to. You were so happy. And then to be attacked so violently, like you said, it was rather traumatic. So talk a little bit more about that, because it didn't actually happen one-on-one in Utah, right? It was when you got home, and then it was online.
It was actually that morning of the baptism is when I first got that. Now, I want to separate 2 incidents. I did have the promise thing that like a few weeks before that, I was able to process that trauma, and I was able to get healed from it. And so basically what happened was Friday morning at 5 a.m., I wake up and I can't get back to sleep. And I realized, I'm processing trauma. So then it was 9 a.m. that morning. I posted, hey, I'm going through a tough time, guys. And by the way, I want to say my phone just exploded. I heard from people throughout the world. People were calling me, Radio Free Mormons calling me, you doing okay, bud? And all these people, I just knew that I had this community of friends that was there, which was so awesome. And that encouraged me. And then it was funny because I kind of was processing. I go on a TV show or a Facebook show in St. Petersburg, downtown St. Petersburg, and I do two episodes there. And then I go to this church on Sunday morning called The Harvest in Sarasota, Florida, which is part of the new evangelical movement. And I actually it was very fortuitous. They flew in a podcaster from New Jersey who just started around the time I started my channel. He started the channel called The New Evangelicals. And it's kind of trying to reclaim evangelicalism from this the weaponizing of Jesus is what's happened, and the weaponization of Christianity. And the thing is that basically the evangelicals make approximately a quarter to a third of the population of this country, have taken over one of the most powerful political parties in the world. And we are very powerful and very influential in this country. There's no question about it. But we have, I feel, and I was talking to I had lunch with the Mormon missionaries today. And by the way, folks, it's Christmas time. And if you have Mormon missionaries around, make sure you feed them. Take care of our Mormon missionaries. We love them. And I had a conversation with him. I was explaining to him how much of a mess evangelicalism is. And I said, it's almost like we sold out, like Esau sold out his birthright. We sold out our prophetic birthright as a prophetic people for political power. And so I feel that's the direction direction has gone. Now, I was involved in politics, and I was very much involved in getting evangelicals involved in the Republican Party. So I was there from the very beginning. I engaged, just so you know, engagements with people. My dad was on one of Pat Robertson's TV shows in Virginia Beach, Virginia. I had interactions with Ralph Reed. So we were kind of involved in starting up the Christian right as a young person. But I tell people, so 20 years ago, I left the evangelical village. And then when I came back, not that long ago, the village was on fire. And then I realized, these people need Jesus. More than anybody, the evangelicals could use Jesus, an authentic relationship with him, because unfortunately, it's almost like Christians, the Christianity that's American Christianity in particular is basically it's about who you vote for now.
Right.
And it's like, no, it's not. It has nothing to do with that. And it's about accumulating power and wealth and prestige. It's about, this prosperity gospel. It's about all these things that, people talk about how wealthy the Mormon church is, and it is. But I imagine if you took the combined assets of all the mega churches and all the Christian ministries, it's probably dwarfs the Mormon church if you combine them all together. So we've accumulated great power, great wealth, and we've sold out our prophetic calling as a people.
Right. I love that comparison, that selling your birthright, because you're right. It's like there's this new, like I said, with the Christian nationalism and the misinformation that's out there about founding fathers. And this was, based in a Christian nation. Founding fathers wanted it to be a Christian nation. And again, going back to read your footnotes, go back and read the history. This is all dogma that's been fed to you. You need to find out more about the true stories of our founding fathers and what their goal really was, which was freedom of religion. Freedom of religion does not mean, they misinterpret the pilgrims landing in this country seeking religious freedom. They misunderstand 1492 or 1416 or whatever the date was. They're confusing that with 1776. And they don't understand that, the pilgrims arrived on this land hoping to do their religion, not Christian freedom, not religious freedom, their religious freedom. And the founding fathers, some of them were deists, some of them were Christian believers, some of them, had completely other beliefs. That was not what this nation was based on. It was based on religious freedom for all. And so this whole idea that our founding fathers set this whole country up to be Christian and Christian only it's again, now we're talking about an elitism. Now we're talking about an other. You're an other. And if you're not one of us, then you're an outsider. Therefore, I don't have to love you. I don't have to treat you kindly because you're an other. And that's where we're headed right now. And it's really scary.
Yeah. And it's so funny because David Barton is somebody who is affiliated with a lot of this as well. And I personally gave President Bush a copy of one of David Barton's books. So that's how bought in I was into that narrative as well growing up. And so I get it. I get where they're coming. I get why they're saying what they say, but it just deconstructing my faith, deconstructing my scriptures, ultimately deconstructing God, going through the whole deconstruction process. Really, I had to reteach myself how to think about things. Right. I had to rewire my brain to think differently. And I really feel like it's almost like this is a gift where I'm able now, as somebody who kind of has been able to kind of de-doctrinate or my indoctrination, if you will. I've been able to now re-enter the evangelical sphere as somebody who's like, well, actually, I can push back on some of this stuff. And I think that's the important thing that is what, now I'm not claiming to be a prophet, but I do think that what prophets are people who stand up against the dominant narrative and yell stop.
Yeah.
and just say, listen, do we really want to go this direction? And I think if any group in America needs a prophetic intervention, if you will, of saying, where in the hell are you guys going? This is a mess. And you're part of the reason why this country is in the mess that it's in. And again, because look, and there are secular progressives that are just as fundamentalist as Christians are. So it's a two-edged thing here, folks. Trust me. I'm not going after one side. I do feel that there's a lot of toxicity on the left too that I find bothersome. And then I tell people, I said, listen, when I first started this channel, God placed me on one side of the street holding the sign. And then across the street, there was other people holding their sign. And God went to me and said, listen, those people on the other side of the street with their signs that disagree with your signs, just remember that they are fellow image bearers, fellow image bearers. And so that's how I look at individuals, as being created in the image of God, fellow image bearers. And just because you have different political opinions than I do, I'm not going to demonize you.
Right.
And I just think it's ridiculous what we're doing. We've traded our birthright as a people for sheer political power. And many of these people, they fall right in line with it. And I'm like, listen, why in the world are we attacking other religions and other faiths when ours is a mess?
Right. And that's the thing. And that's the thing that, as you mentioned, very often. Now, you were not LDS. You have never been a Mormon, and yet your faith crisis led you into atheism because of the black and white thinking and the idea that, well, let me think about this, because if that isn't right, then maybe this story is also not right. And so there is a journey that many ex-Mormons go on where they are also led into atheism, because you start, I know I went right from, well, if the Mormon history is propaganda and has been whitewashed and we've been fed a lot of untruths, where else are there untruths? And so I started the horsemen that you mentioned, Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hutchins, and Sam Harris, and Bart Ehrman. And I learned so much. It was exhilarating to begin to learn some other truths. And there's certain times when I've listened to Steve or Sam Harris and said, that makes a lot of sense. And then there's other times when I've listened to him and said, I don't think so. Yeah. I don't like what you're saying. And I feel so good at being able to do that. I can listen to, like I the other day, I put on TikTok, I love Jane Christie. Have you had Jane Christie on your show? Mm-mm. She's such a kick. She's so smart. And her and Sarah, I love it's Sarah in Scotland. You and I are from the Midwest, so it's Sarah. Yeah.
Oh, right. Oh, you're talking the one from Scotland, 21st Century Saints?
Yeah.
I've been on their program.
Yes, you have. That's right. Right. So she's working with Sarah, and they've just developed such a beautiful program in the United Kingdom to start having more background checks and things like that for people that are working with children, things that they can't even do in the United States. That's what's so sad, is that the simple things it's taken them a year to achieve what they've done nationwide that we cannot do in this country because of all of the pushback that you get about background checks and things like that. But anyway, she was talking about, for those of you listeners that aren't LDS, we have 12 apostles, and then we have a first presidency, which makes 15. They call it the Quorum of the 15. One of the apostles just died, so they have to bring in another apostle, so they have the 12. And which I love. I heard the other day, they said, why did Jesus have 12 apostles? It's because, well, it's all related to the 12 tribes. There's always a symbolism associated with these numbers, the 7 this and 40 days of this and 3 days of this. There's always a parable that goes along with this. But people that are literalists will look at that and go, 40 days. Wow, that's a long time to not eat or drink anything. You're like, okay, this is all symbolism. Okay, we need to go back to symbolism. But anyway, so that's why there were 12 apostles, because of the 12 tribes and whatnot. So one of them died, so they had to bring in a new. So they've just put in a new apostle, and he happens to be this wonderful young man from England. And so again, the beauty of the English accent is, I swear you could read the phone book, and people would be like, "Oh, that was so profound."
Yes.
So he's got this beautiful accent, and he was talking about abuse. And he was saying very simple things like, it's never the abuser's fault. You should never think that any of this abuse was caused by you, and things like that. And most of the LDS community were like, that was amazing. That was he was inspired, And Jane and Sarah were like, no kidding. Really, go ask anybody on the bus. They're going to tell you the exact same thing. This wasn't that profound, but because it came from this source, it was taken as like, wow, So it just goes back to this whole indoctrination of who has authority and where did this come from and why should we accept that and does that take precedence over what someone said last year and where's the schizophrenia coming from, because last year you said this and now you're saying this and I don't know what to believe anymore. And so it's just, if you're a critical thinker at all and you start doing your research and like you mentioned, start reading the footnotes, you're going to start having a little bit of dissonance in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to lead you to where you're at right now, right?
Right. And that's the thing. Like for me, I know what it's like to lose one's faith.
Yeah.
Because I've already lost my faith in God. And I know a lot of people are afraid to investigate because they're afraid they're going to lose their faith.
Right.
And I understand that. But I also say that, I've been able to return back into faith. It's much more nuanced. It's much more different. But, this is the thing. And I'm going to push back now a little bit on ex-Mormon atheists, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
Can I push back on them a little bit?
Please.
And I do this out of love, by the way.
Yeah.
I feel like so many ex-Mormons go straight to atheism. One, because they're encountering a lot of these Christian apologists who are encouraging people. Many of them are standing outside of the temples and they're doing their signs and they're yelling. And people who go to general conference, they say, well, if I'm ever going to leave this church, I ain't going to theirs.
Right.
And so they go straight to atheism. Okay.
Because they don't know where else to go.
They don't know where else to go. Which, because like, do I really want to become that person holding the sign, mocking Mormons? Right. They don't want to do that. Right. So I wanted to say, though, that one of the things I want to be kind of critical of is that a lot of the people who are heroes to ex-Mormon atheists are believers. So people don't realize this. I had lunch with Maxine Hanks when I was out in Utah last time I was there. Oh. And we had a wonderful 3-hour conversation along with my friend Casey Kern. And she told me, she says, Steve, do you realize that virtually, I think she said 5 of the 6 September 6th all had angelic visitations after they were excommunicated?
No.
Yeah. And then, and these are heroes to the ex-Mormon atheists. Well, do you disregard their angel stories?
Yeah.
Like you disregard Moroni?
Right.
Right. And then I always tell me, D. Michael Quinn is considered to be like a folk hero in the ex-Mormon community. This man died on his deathbed, had a stronger testimony of the Book of Mormon than B.H. Roberts did. Yeah. So what I'm trying to say is that there are people who have been critical of the church. There have been people who have been excommunicated by the church who are respected in the ex-atheist community, ex-Mormon community. 90% are atheists, but yet they're still believers. Yeah. So I think that that's something just to grapple with. Why is it that these people it would still be believers after all that they've been through and would have spiritual experiences? And so to me, that tells me that there's more to this than just the materialistic world. Right. It's easy to say, screw it. I don't have anything to do with it. I've been burned. I don't want to go anywhere else. Yeah. I'm not believing anymore. I'm saying is that the reason why there are 9 other species that we were related to, but only Homo sapiens made it. Mm-hmm. And part of the reason I think we made it is because we, if anything, the spark of the divine happened with us. And like many people say, you can tell when the divine spark happened with humanity is the first time we start seeing bodies that were buried, or that we see things buried with them that maybe would help them in the afterlife, or that was important to them. Or like Margaret Mead said, we became human when we started finding remains of humans with healed hip bones. In other words, they were picked up and they were carried. Okay. This is the humanity. This is the divine spark. Believing that we were more than just animals, that we were more than just meat, that we were to bury people, that we were to help people. This is the divine spark, because we recognize there is something bigger than ourselves. Right. And by believing in something bigger than ourselves, it's what gave us an evolutionary advantage over the rest of our cousins that didn't make it. Right. And so I tell people, you don't turn your back on your spirituality, because that is part of who we are as a species. And so by cutting yourself off from that, you're cutting yourself off from a real important part of an aspect of our humanity. That's why when I go to people, I say, look, I understand. I was a materialistic atheist for a long time. I even understand why you need even being in that place. I even tell Aaron Ra, one of the biggest atheists on YouTube, I said, Aaron, I'm a pro-atheist evangelical. And he looks at me and he's like, what are you talking about? And I said, I said, I understand why when people have been hurt, and again, I'm not talking about any particular church or religion. I'm talking about people who have been victimized spiritually and suffered from PTSD, from spiritual and religious abuse of all kinds. Okay.
Right.
For many of them, they've been hurt so bad that even the concept of God triggers them. They almost have to become atheists in order for them to mentally heal.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do look at atheism as there's therapeutic value to atheism. So I don't hate on atheists.
Right.
But I also tell people said, don't just continue to progress, continue to learn. If atheism is a place you need to be in, fine. But don't completely shut the door to the supernatural, to there being something bigger than ourselves, to being able to tap into some kind of spirit, into spirituality. And I really feel like that's important, not to lose touch with that part of your humanity. Because you're an incomplete person if you're not doing it. I'm not bashing you. I'm just saying that there's an incompleteness that happens if you're not spiritually attuned to things as well.
Right. And I love that. I love that because people cannot discount the experiences that they've had. People will say, it was very hard for me to leave the church because of the spiritual experiences I had. And it's like, well, I've had some amazing spiritual experiences since I resigned my membership from the church, because I haven't resigned my life. I'm still a living creature. I still have children. I still have a spouse. I still have grandchildren that I'm concerned about, that I think about, that I meditate over, that I try to learn. Continual learning should make you happy. It should bring joy to your life. The wonder, the why, asking why these things happen, and then searching for an answer for that why should bring you joy. And if that brings you to some kind of a burning in your bosom, as we talked about when we first started the show, then you don't need to discount that with anything. It doesn't have to be taken down into some kind of just an emotional chemical reaction. It doesn't have to be made into a freaking revelation. It can just be appreciated for what it is. You can be grateful for what it was, and then you can go on loving and learning. And I think that's the experience that I'm at right now, is because I have left this fundamental religion that I feel was very restrictive as to what I was able to learn. Like I didn't know anything about the Bible. I could tell you the biblical stories that come from the children's book if you go to a Christian bookstore. So you've got the story of Job and all of the stories that we've all been taught as children. That was my biblical learning. So leaving this fundamental religion that told me not to look into the Bible, there's really no sense in even looking at the Bible, because we don't really believe it's been translated correctly. And the good thing for you to do is just to read the Book of Mormon. So I read the Book of Mormon. And so now that I've been given permission to advance my learning into other areas, I love listening to, like you say, the Four Horsemen and these wonderful learned men that have and I think, you know what, a lot of that makes a lot of sense. But then I think, yeah, but what about this? And what about that? And I love asking why. Yeah. Just ask why. But if you can turn that love for learning into, I don't care. I don't care if you're Jewish. I don't care if you're Muslim. I don't care if whatever, if you're Lutheran or Protestant or Methodist or whatever. I love what you're doing. Tell me what you've done to serve your community. Tell me what your love for Jesus has done to your family, or how you've taken that love and turned it into some kind of action. Then I want to celebrate that action that's been taken by that love, and not criticized. Or, when I have a really big thing with the abortion. A lot of the things that I was listening to when I was kind of doing a little bit of research for this show, and they were talking about the Christian nationalism and the way they described the abortion and cutting up babies, and they just turned it into just this base, murderous, horrendous activity. And I'm like, there's a bigger picture to this, and there has to be more. You've got to look at a bigger picture than just, you're killing babies. You've got to look at the woman. You've got to look at the context. You've got to look at the situation. There's so many things you have to look at. You can't just take a stand and say, this is my stand. No matter what, this is my stand. And that's where I feel like a lot of the evangelicals, it doesn't matter. This is my stand. I'm right. You're wrong. If you don't believe the way I believe in God, then you don't believe in God. Therefore, you are Satan incarnate, you know? And so that's the sad part. And I see the goodness that you do with your show, the broad thought process of the people that you have on your show. And then for me to see you being traumatized and hurt by people that call themselves, you know, followers of Jesus and God was just like, when is this going to change? When are we going to make this?
Yeah. Well, you know,
180?
the thing, Renee, is, you know, actually, I didn't finish the story. I just remembered. So I had woke up in that weekend and I'm going through the trauma. Well, what happens is on Monday, I spend 2 hours with Kara on her program, Atheist Kara, wearing a Jesus shirt, because that's what I do. And then I go and tape an interview with Rebecca Biblioteca with this guy named Alan about saving the Provo Temple from destruction. And we need to do a petition drive. Now, you have to understand, earlier in that day, my mom was like, Steve, we were having a situation and I was going to yell and scream at some people the next day. Let's just put it that way. Because I was full of anger. And my mom went to me and she said, Steve, I don't think you should be here tomorrow. So I taped this interview, and it has not unrelated to everything else I'm doing. I taped the interview and I walk out of my studio and I go to my mom. I said, Mom, I'm going to be okay tomorrow. I'm healed. I realized that just the very act of doing my show is my therapy.
Oh, that's so true.
And I was healed from the trauma, just like that. It just about 72 hours or so of trauma, and it disappeared. Now, you understand, like, my depression, anxiety, and stress has melted away to almost nothing to compare to what it was just a few years ago. So I know I'm going through this healing process, and this channel is about this healing process. Is literally it's about me being able to reach out to people and see. This is the thing. To me, being a gay man is a gift, because it enabled me to be able to see the other, because I was the other while I was in this in-group at the same time. And I recognize how sensitive I am and empathetic I am to people who are mistreated, who are marginalized, whose voices aren't heard. That's why I like to take somebody like Matthew Gill, a prophet of about 20 people in England, who translated his own scriptures. And I give him 3 episodes on my program, and he's forever grateful that I gave him that opportunity. Nobody else would have ever heard of him if I didn't do that, because I like all different voices. That's why I always say all the voices of the restoration will be heard in Mormon book reviews, because I want to hear all the different voices. I want to hear the feminist voice. I want to hear the LGBTQ voice. I want to hear the progressive voice. I want to hear the conservative voice. I want to hear all the different voices. And I get attacked for, you shouldn't platform this person. You shouldn't do this. And I'm like, listen, you're missing the whole point. I'm here. I want everybody to come on. Now, I will not have malevolent people come on my program. Right. I'm not going to give up a platform to a guy who's going to be some cult leader that's going to, that's not happening. Okay. And there are plenty of people like that are immediately disqualified themselves as being guests on my program. Yeah. But I do feel that there are good, decent people from all different camps that we need to be able to then say, okay, I'm going to have this conservative person on here who's going to make some of you progressives feel uncomfortable, but I want to humanize them. Or I'm going to bring on this transgender individual who's a progressive in the community of Christ, Evan Charlie, who is polyamorous. He wants his polyamorous relationships. Wants their polyamorous relationships to be recognized by the community of Christ. And so he's like the far left of the community of Christ. Well, guess what, Evan? You come on my show and you tell your story, and you make people in power feel uncomfortable. And that's what I try to do. Yeah. And to me, that's what I want to do. And also, this is the thing. I want to learn more. And this is the thing. What I love about Richard Bushman, he's a man in his 90s, and he still has an imagination. He still wants to learn.
Right.
And see, this is the thing. Like, a lot of these people that are critical of me, whether they're LDS apologists or they're Christian apologists, they don't have the intellectual curiosity that Richard Bushman has, that I love. Yeah. And this is a man who taps into the same stuff that I tap into, and he's still learning. He loves talking with me. He asks me he peppers me with questions all the time, wants my opinion on stuff. He just is really enthralled by the work that I'm doing and loves it. And I just want to let you know, Renee, that I'm planning on having Richard and Claudia Bushman to come back on my program to kind of both talk about their legacies. And of course, I'm sure Claudia is probably one of your heroes.
Oh, she is a kick in the pants. She is so funny. We went and saw her when they were introducing their book with Peggy Fletcher Stack and the Salt Lake Tribune, Mormon Land. And we sat and watched their fireside. And she is so funny because she's just a positive, she's just a mover and a shaker. And like you said, she's in her 90s, I think, she might be in her, and she's just so happy and so positive and talking about the things that she's going to do. And I just had an idea the other day. I think I might start doing that. And I thought, I hope there are more people in their 90s that sit around and go, you know what? I think I'm going to go do that instead of, well, I'm too old. I'm too old to make a difference in this world, And
another great woman that we have to talk about is Sandra Tanner. Now, I'm almost done with the book. I read most of the book on the plane on my last trip. And Sandra Tanner comes to every single one of my meetups when I ever have one. She's 83 years old and she still has her fastball. She's still sharp as a tack.
She is.
She's an amazing woman. Honestly, Gerald and Sandra Tanner are heroes to me. Yeah. Because I really feel like I tap more into the spirit of Gerald Tanner than most Christians. A lot of Christians are trying to be the next Gerald and Sandra Tanner. Yeah. But they don't understand the Tanners. And now look, Sandra doesn't probably agree with everything I do or say, and that's fine. Right. But these critics, they want to be they emulate, they're trying to emulate Gerald and Sandra Tanner. And I always tell them that there's a section here in the book. I actually should look it up, but I pretty much know it verbatim. So Gerald Tanner, they finally left the Restoration and decided to join just a conventional Protestant church in Salt Lake City. Now they're still kids; they're still in their early 20s. And Gerald Tanner goes to the pastor and says to him, "Listen," he said, "I'm interested in being a member of this church, but let me tell you, if you say one cross word about the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints from the pulpit, I'm going to stand up and walk out of here." That's what Gerald Tanner says. Yeah. So these same evangelical critics who go after me, like, do you realize what Gerald Tanner was doing? He was friends with Ogden Kraut and Ann Wild, the two most prominent polygamists in the state of Utah. They were friends. Gerald and Sandra Tanner were friends with them. They were friends with a lot of the scholars in Mormonism. They weren't out there with blowhorns, going after people. All I tell people is all the Tanners did was publish the Gospel Topics essays 50 years before the church did. That's all they did.
And the greatest thing is I've got the big red book. And if you have not lived long enough to understand what mimeographing and how they put that literature together and the hours that they had to spend, duplicating these pages and setting these pages up, we're just a few steps above the printing press here. I mean, what they were doing in the 60s and the 70s. And she just got vulnerable for a little bit. I heard her on a podcast, and her memory and her wit is just so sharp. And so she remembers these dates and times and facts and things like that. And it's so beautiful. But just for a brief moment, she talked a little bit about her kids and what her kids were going through because of the persecution that they were getting as a family. And that you don't hear her talk about that very much, but it just made me, she was quietly doing, and I love how she talks about, when Mark Hoffman came into her store and she's like, "Oh yeah, this is great," and Gerald was like, "Sandra, this is fake. This is all fake." And she's like, no, he told me this is, and I love how she admits that. And she talks about how vulnerable she was but what they did together and how she stood by him and helped him out and stood by her kids. And she is such a hero for me. I just absolutely love her. And the first Sunstone that I went to, I went up and I sat next to her and I said, we're the only gray-haired people around here, so we got to stick together. So it's like, she's just absolutely wonderful. So, well, Stephen, I'm so glad to hear that you were able to find peace in the backlash that you got. And I love that you are getting the support that you deserve for sure for what you're bringing. It's unique, and I think it's beautiful. Again, you're asking why, you're letting people tell their stories, you're not criticizing them, but you do push back, and I love that because you do it in a very kind and thoughtful way. It's a way where you go, "Oh no, that's a good point," and that's what pushback is supposed to do. Yep. And so anyway, thank you so much.
Well, Renee, I just want to tell you, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me tonight.
Well, it's my pleasure. I'm so thankful for Rebecca to give me an opportunity to meet you in person and to have, just to sit down and have a meal with you and get to know you personally. And I can't invite you to Arizona because you live in a beautiful place as well. So, so it's, a lot of the other people are like, get out of that snow and come to Arizona. But you're like, we don't have snow either. So we're good.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Yep.
So anyway, well, you have a Merry Christmas and thank you for all of your knowledge and your love and what you're doing to make this world a better place to live in and bringing the Christ back in Christian. That's the best part.
That's the key thing. It's about just trying to emulate the Savior and just realize that it's not a black and white world we live in. There's a lot of gray, and we need to be able to put ourselves in places that make us feel uncomfortable if we truly want to grow as a species and as a people. If you want to flourish in life, you don't want to just stay with your in-group. You need to reach out and talk to people who are different than you. And when you do that, it's going to change the way you perceive things, and it's going to make you a whole person as opposed to a just another person who's taking one side, holding their signs on one side of the street, yelling at the people with the signs that say the opposite thing. We got to just get away from that goofiness.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. You go finish your Friday evening. I will not disrupt it any longer, and have a great weekend.
All right, God bless.
All right. Bye-bye. Oh my gosh. Was he not the best guest to have on a couple days before Christmas? He is the most loving and kind person that I think I've ever met. And you've got to watch his show, Mormon Book Reviews, and just watch his show with an open mind. And that's the thing that I'm stressing on. If you want to become more visible, as the name of my show is She Became Visible, you have to understand who you are and why you are who you are and what your beliefs really are. And in order to do that, you have to start asking, why do I think that way? Where did I learn that? Who told me that? Should I look into this? You've got to start opening up your eyes to some more critical thinking. And even in places where it might be a little uncomfortable, where you think, like we got on a few, questionable topics tonight, but you might want to say, let me see if I can do some more research and find out some more information. One of the things I respect a lot about Bill Reel is that he's actually said, I'm starting to do some double thinking and maybe some rethinking on what can I think of it? The clergy privilege with abuse cases. And he's doing some research. He's looking into some data. He's maybe thinking, maybe I should think differently about having the opportunity to do a clergy repentance process. And should there be mandatory abuse? I don't know, but I'm going to do some research. And that's what I like. And when we talk about that scary thing called abortion, I want to refer you to a book called Ejaculate Responsibly by Gabrielle Blair. And she is a mother of 6. She is an active LDS woman, but she has some wonderful things in there about male reproduction and female reproduction and the responsibility for pregnancies and how this whole thing works. So it's just one of those things where you cannot come to a black and white conclusion until you've done enough asking why. And I believe that's what Steve does on his show. He invites people to come on his show so he can say, why do you think that? And why should I think that? And where did you get that idea? And thank you for sharing that idea with us today. So I hope you've learned something today. Have a Merry Christmas. I hope you all enjoy this holiday. Make it the best it can be for you. You don't have to be surrounded by family and friends. If you can find some peace just within yourself, make this holiday the best. I think Hallmark has caused more stress and fear and anger in people's lives just because they've set up a scenario that is not true for everyone, and it doesn't have to be true for everyone. So hopefully you'll find some joy this Christmas season, and we will see you in the new year. Bye-bye. Thank you for joining me today on She Became Visible. Join me each week as my guests and I explore the path of womanhood and tell all our stories. We'll talk about finding the courage to be ourselves and motivate each other to be everything that we're capable of and meant to be, no matter what happens around us. Please like, share, and subscribe. subscribe, and don't forget to donate at SheBecameVisible.org.